We ready? Good morning. Javier Becerra, Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. We just had a actually very interesting meeting where we had a couple of guests give us information on some important activities within the country and a focus on a number of issues that clearly Congress must work on. And we want to thank Secretary David Skorton from the Smithsonian Institution who came by to give us some remarks, and to Chairman Tom Wheeler of the Federal Communications Commission who came by as well, told us about some of the pressing issues that are in front of Congress and the American people as well. My colleagues will comment on a number of matters, but I'm joined by our Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley, by the ranking Democrat on issues on the Appropriations Committee that deal with not just legislative matters, but she's also been on top of this issue dealing with the Zika virus, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who also happens to be our chairwoman for the Democratic National Committee. We're pleased to have her with us, and we're pleased to have the ranking member of the Education and Labor Committee, Bobby Scott from Virginia, who will speak to us on an issue he's been championing for quite some time, dealing with making sure working Americans get paid a livable wage. And so we're here to talk about any number of issues. The difficulty is it's tough to believe that this Congress is going to try to get its work done. For too many people, Republicans seem to be caught in a time warp. People are thinking, wages are going nowhere. And what are Republicans going to do about it? I'm saying that because I believe it. But those are not my words. Those are Speaker Paul Ryan's words. So, Speaker Ryan, what are you going to do about it? American workers want to get back to working hard and earning a livable wage for the hard work that they've given this country. What are you going to do about it? Mr. Speaker, there are a whole bunch of people in America who are starting to wonder, could they be infected by the Zika virus? And if you're a woman who happens to be pregnant or thinking of having a child, you're really concerned. So they're asking, Mr. Speaker, what are you going to do about it? Mr. Speaker, you've been asked to help us deal with the crisis in Flint, Michigan. You haven't done anything. It's time for us to get to work for the American people. It's time for Congress to do its job. And so whether it's making sure that we're not robbing from the funds that we put out there to make sure that Ebola didn't become a real crisis in America, which is something Republicans are talking about doing, taking the money from the Ebola research and prevention dollars to be able to fund the prevention activities that we need for Zika, that most Americans would say, well, it's like taking money from Alzheimer's research and treatment to take care of diabetes research and treatment. Yeah, both are good, but you shouldn't rob Peter to help Paul. In this country, Peter and Paul deserve to have their government stand with them. And in this case, Mr. Speaker, what are you going to do about it? And so here we are to say, we're ready to do a lot. We're ready to do something meaningful in the lives of Americans to show them that we want to get to work. But we need to have willing partners. And right now, Mr. Speaker, we can't find one. And finally, a week has already passed, and we are wondering, where is the federal government's budget that the House of Representatives was supposed to pass last week? It's time for us to get to work to do our job, because whether you're concerned about having a baby because you're hearing too much about the Zika virus, or you've been working really hard but you're still making a minimum wage and you can't live off of that, or whether it's trying to figure out if you can drink the water that comes out of your tap in Flint, Michigan because of the lead contamination that occurred as a result of the inaction or perhaps the criminal actions of folks in state government from the Governor Snyder on down. People are asking, Congress, what are you going to do about it? Mr. Speaker, what are you going to do? It's time to do your job. With that, let me yield now to the Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus in the House, Joe Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's no honeymoon when you become Speaker. There's no time to learn the ropes, so to speak. We know our Republican colleagues, the far right within their party, gave the Speaker no honeymoon. But the reality is there are so many crises that our country is facing right now. There's no time for that. And quite frankly, I wouldn't give him credit for a honeymoon. This is all willful. We hear so often through the media about how the public is upset that their government doesn't do anything for them. They're Republican led Congress doesn't do anything for them, but it's willful. We have an unprecedented crisis in Flint, Michigan. The water system has been poisoned. There's been some low-level criminal indictments. We have been calling for the governor to step up and do more. But the reality is that what's happening in Flint, Michigan is today in Flint, but the American people are wondering whether or not their government, their federal government, will do anything to help them through this crisis, whether or not the Republican Congress will do anything to help them through this Congress. And so far, it's no. I would like to call them feckless, but to say that, they would have had to have made an effort to do something. So I can't even say that about them. What's worse than that? They've done nothing. It's not a failure because they haven't tried. If they tried to do something and it failed, well, that's a failure. But they haven't even tried to do something. What do you call that? They've abdicated their role in this government to lead. And the American people, more and more, are beginning to recognize that they have no vision for the country. How can you have a vision for the future of the country, our country, if you fail to help the people in our nation who are going through such a crisis like the people of Flint, Michigan are? And that's what the American people are looking at. They're saying, if you'll do it to them, what happens if it's in my neighborhood? Does the federal government care about me? Does the Republican Congress care about me? Apparently, once again, the answer is no, whether it's on this, on Zika, or on the minimum wage, or a myriad of issues that Americans are dealing with and suffering with as this Republican majority in the House of Representatives continues to fiddle. And with that, I'll turn it over to Debbie Wasserman Schultz from Florida.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Vice Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you for bringing us together here. You know, I am long past tired of spending as many years as we have here dealing with Republicans who sit on their hands, make excuses, refuse to address the crises that come up, and who eventually have to be shamed into doing the right thing. I mean, unfortunately, with the Republican leadership in this Congress, who have pledged from day one of the Obama administration to be nothing but an obstacle to progress, the only way we finally get them to do the right thing is when we leave them with no other options because of the intensity of the pressure that is required. That was the case with the 9/11 bill. It's been the case with Sandy relief. Name any crisis this country has faced since Republicans have been in charge of this Congress. And it's never, the answer is never, yeah, hey, let's sit down together at the table and work together to try to solve this problem. We know we're going to have differences of opinion, but we agree on the goal and let's try to get there. No, it's always obstruction. And so, you know, I find it humorous and amusing that we spent a lot of years with the Republicans trying to put us on defense when Democrats controlled the Senate about their inability to produce, their so-called inability to produce a budget. And now we have a deadline, self-imposed, that the Republicans had of producing a budget last week. We have a speaker who was the unified choice, the person who was supposed to be able to bring together his conference on around consensus items like how they would budget. We believe that a budget is the value statement for the country. Certainly the value statement for what we believe should be included to help improve people's lives. And yet, that self-imposed deadline gone. What about Flint? As my colleague Joe Crowley said, people are being poisoned by the water there. This was a crisis that was self-imposed, man-made, absolute neglect and refusal of Republicans at every level of government to step up and do the right thing and take care of these people. You know, as a mother of young children, I can't even imagine the panic. And having been to Flint now and talked with those parents, I get some sense of what it must be like to be having drinking water coming out of your tap that you know will have devastating consequences for your child for the rest of their lives. To add insult and pain to injury. You know, I represent thousands and thousands of Puerto Ricans in my district in South Florida. And you know, besides that, we in Florida, of any state in the continental U.S., have the most cases of Zika, 93 now and counting. 500 cases in Puerto Rico. Now, there is a lot of back and forth travel between Puerto Rico and the state of Florida, and the likelihood of this crisis expanding exponentially, as it already has been, poses a grave threat, not only to pregnant women, but because we have a great likelihood that this is not only a mosquito-borne virus, but is also sexually transmitted. We absolutely have to deal with this. 60 days ago, the administration submitted a request for an emergency supplemental appropriations bill of $1.9 billion. And on the Appropriations Committee, we have gotten nothing but obstruction. Nothing but we need more comments like we need more information, or we haven't been briefed, or we should take the leftover money from the Ebola crisis and move it over to try to address this. Well, you have pregnant women who are susceptible to this virus, and they are giving birth to babies, and we've all seen the horrifying photos. But more than the photos, the complications from microcephaly on a child when they're born are devastating. And that is what the Republicans are turning a deaf ear and a blind eye towards. Those babies and those pregnant moms and the potential for thousands of more cases. That's why Nita Lowey, Rosa DeLauro, and I introduced emergency supplemental legislation this week to appropriate the $1.9 billion. The administration has repeatedly briefed Republican appropriators and the Republican leadership, provided documentation and everything they need to be able to make a decision. Take up the bill. Let's have a discussion about it. But sitting on your hands and, again, as the chairman said, robbing Peter to pay Paul, putting your finger in a dike and ignoring that the dike has broken. You know, when you are engulfed by the water that overwhelms you, you know, don't turn around and wonder why and how that happened. You will have only yourselves to blame. It's unacceptable how much the Republicans are leaving on the table, to say nothing of Merrick Garland, who the United States Senate refuses to give a hearing to and take up a legitimate, constitutionally provided nomination of a Supreme Court justice. No, they'd rather leave the Supreme Court of the United States, which only has 9 members, with 8 members. We've already seen a case that has deadlocked. We'll see more in the future. The Republicans need to step up and do their job because they are jeopardizing people's lives in this country, all across the country, and it's unacceptable, and we won't stand for it. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague who's been a champion for the rights of working people, Bobby Scott, who will talk about the minimum wage and other issues about which he is passionate.
Thank you. Thank you. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. I just wanted to announce that you're all invited to a forum this afternoon at 2 o'clock on the minimum wage from a business perspective. 174 House Democrats are co-sponsors of H.R. 2150, the Raise the Wage Act, which will increase the minimum wage. The bills raising the minimum wage would give more than 35 million Americans a long overdue raise, and would, when fully implemented, a family of 3 would be above the poverty level. It is unconscionable at today's rate that people can work full-time and still remain in poverty. There's a broad agreement among Democrats that there ought to be a substantial increase in the minimum wage. Not a single Republican, however, has co-sponsored the legislation, and they've refused to even hold a hearing. They claim that businesses can't raise the wage because it would kill jobs. But unfortunately, Frank Lutz, the Republican pollster, the results of one of his polls, the results were released and found that 80% of business executives, according to that poll, say just the opposite, that they believe the minimum wage should be increased. Research shows that a modest increase in the minimum wage will reduce workforce turnover, increase productivity, stimulate consumer spending and promote job growth. That's why businesses want an increase in the minimum wage. So today at 2 o'clock in Rayburn 2261, we'll listen to real experts talk about the minimum wage from a business perspective. It's shameful that people can work full-time and still remain under the poverty level. The Raise the Wage Act and other bills will raise the minimum wage to address that, and you'll hear all about it at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you.
Bobby, thank you very much for that, and we'll take any questions.
Question for Congressman Wasserman, Schultz, and also the rest of you. With Hillary Strong's showing last night, is it time for you guys to start trying to get Bernie out of the race? Is he hurting the party by remaining in the race at this point? And what do you think of the status of his run?
Well, speaking with my DNC chair hat on, we have 14 primaries remaining, and our expectation is that this primary will run through its normal and its normal process. June 7th is our last day for primaries, and the decision of the candidates at that point will be theirs. So we're at the same time managing the primary nominating contest, making sure that it's handled in a neutral way. Alongside that, we're preparing for the general election.
Joe, Bobby?
That said, if you're preparing for the general election, that portends that, and we know what Hillary Clinton's delegate count is at this point, 90% or so of all delegates allocated, that this is wrapped up then, shouldn't people be moving on, regardless of the date on the calendar?
Well, we've been preparing for the general election. That's our dual responsibility. We walk and chew gum at the same time at the DNC. And so while the primary nominating contest has unfolded, we have been gearing up and working for months with our state parties to lay down the infrastructure necessary to stand up coordinated campaigns, particularly in battleground states, making sure that we're focusing on placing staff and building our, strengthening our voter file, developing and strengthening our digital tools, because we have a digital and technological advantage over the Republican that we've increased and that it's going to be critical to our success.
Can you do those walk and chew gum things at the same time when you still have two candidates and everybody's not coalesced around that one candidate?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're able to prepare for the general election while the primary is ongoing.
I'll just respond to that. First, let me express my gratitude to Debbie Wasserman Schultz for the job she's done. It's not been an easy job. It's a tough job, given that she has a tough job as a congresswoman as well from Florida to begin with. But someone who is more partisan, I guess you can say. I've endorsed Senator Clinton very, very early on. I do think we're maybe at that point in the campaign that we begin to focus solely on the issues. I'm under no illusions that Mr. Sanders will withdraw at this point. I'm not calling for him to do that. He's going to continue to hopefully talk about the issues as Senator Clinton or Secretary Clinton is going to be doing, and focusing on the issues that we as Democrats care. What unifies us at this point are the issues that we care about. I think if we focus on that, in the end, we'll come out of this primary a much stronger party. Our candidate, whoever that will be, and I believe it will be Secretary Clinton, will be a stronger candidate for it, ready to take on Donald Trump, because I believe Donald Trump will be the nominee from the Republican side. But regardless, as to whoever that is going to be, we're going to be a stronger party, and we'll be able to take on whoever the Republicans throw at us this November and defeat them. And by the way, will also help us win back the House of Representatives. That's critical. Not only the Senate, but the House as well, because the House is in play because of their nominee, who I believe will be Donald Trump.
Other question? Yes.
I wonder if you could elaborate at all on what Chairman Caucus talked about today, what the message was. And in particular, I'm wondering if you talked about the agency's set-top box proposal, which I think dozens of Democrats, including perhaps Mr. Crowley, have expressed some concern about.
So he touched on a number of issues that are important to regular families, how they can afford to have access to the internet, how we can make sure that our families are accessing information through the internet at the fastest speed, so we're as competitive as any other country in the world, how we make sure that we provide American families with the tools that are available as a result of this technology boom, and how we make sure that we do that in a way that doesn't let American families be exploited or taken advantage of in the process. And so it was a really good conversation, several questions, and we're probably going to have him come back up again because there's a lot of work that he's doing. He mentioned how too often the Republican Congress has been an obstruction. These are my words, not his. But from what I took, it's been difficult for the FCC to move forward without Congress getting in the way. And it's unfortunate because Americans are trying to make sure that they get the best product at the lowest price. And the last thing they need is to have a Congress that's getting in the way. We should be doing our job to make the internet information, this technology boom available to everybody. And I think the chairman has made it very clear that there's a Federal Communications Commission that's trying to be on the side of the American consumer.
Since let me just follow up as well, because I was mentioned in that as well. First, let me say that Tom and I are very good friends. I say that because I have full faith and confidence in him. I was delighted when he took over the FCC. But this is a very complicated issue. I am for whatever is best practices for my consumers, for my constituents. But I also am mindful of the fact that it is complicated, and it includes the issues of copyright, whether it's music material or film material. And I also have a consistent record of making sure that artists and producers and makers of entertainment, those who create content, are justly and properly rewarded for doing that. I have grave concerns and continue to have had on the issue of piracy. I think every American should be worried about piracy. When I was a young man, I went to McDonald's as a young child, a young adult or a teenager, and one of my best friends was working behind the counter, and I was hungry. He said, "I'll give you a hamburger and French fries." You know, and I, not thinking about it, you know, my buddy was giving it to me. I went home. My mother said, "What'd you eat for lunch?" And my friend at McDonald's gave me some lunch. Did you pay for it? No, he gave it to me. Does he own McDonald's? You know, nothing's free. I had to go back and pay for my food because of that. And that was a life lesson for me. It's a life lesson for all young people that music, as it's produced, is not free. Movies and television and video that's produced by a person, they need to be rewarded for that. And those are the issues that I'm concerned about in terms of the advancement. I would like to see many advancements in terms of cable television and opportunity. But there are legitimate issues that we need to be concerned about, and that's what I expressed to the chairman.
So, excuse me, did Chairman Wheeler have a response to that?
I did not talk to him today specifically about it. I'm the vice chair of the caucus. It's an opportunity for our colleagues. You know, I can talk to Tom by myself and write letters to him as well. But that really is an opportunity for our colleagues to have an opportunity to speak to him, and I chose at that point not to address that specific issue.
Other questions? If not, we want to thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Thanks.
Can I ask
Oh.
one more quick question? Sorry. Chairman Bishop has said he wants a strong Democratic majority to support this Puerto Rico bill. Do you think that will happen?
The chairman will get a strong Democratic majority if he has a strong bill that reflects the values of the Democratic members in the House and I'm sorry. Right, and that's what I was going to say, and also respects what the people in Puerto Rico say that they want. And my sense is that I know very few families in Puerto Rico who are saying, please, 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 cut the minimum wage on the island so that we can do better. Or please, 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 allow there to be rating of our pensions when we retire so that we can do better. Or please, 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 undo the rules that protect us when it comes to doing overtime work so that we can do better. And so I believe Democrats have been saying since last year we need to get our job done when it comes to helping the American citizens who live on the island of Puerto Rico. We harken back to what Speaker Ryan said last year as well, that he would get this done in the first quarter of 2016, and we're still waiting. The difficulty isn't on the Democratic side. The difficulty is on the Republican side. Chairman Bishop can't get his own Republican members to support his bill. And so we're waiting for our Republican colleagues to get their job done, whether it's on Zika, whether it's with Flint, whether it's with increasing the minimum wage, or whether it's dealing with this fiscal crisis that the people of Puerto Rico are ready to resolve if we would give them the tools. We don't have to give them a penny. We just have to change the structure of the laws that allow them to deal with this on their own. And unfortunately, it looks like some people are trying to exact a price that isn't necessarily on behalf of the American citizens who live on the island of Puerto Rico. So Democrats are ready. We've been ready. We're waiting for a bill that would reflect those values. And I guarantee you, the moment we see a bill that reflects those values, you'll see a whole bunch of Democrats ready to vote for it.
Add a couple other things and agree wholeheartedly with everything that Javier just said. It's beyond insulting to hear Republicans suggest that what Puerto Rico wants is a bailout. You know, as the chairman said, Puerto Ricans, whether they live on the island or whether they live in the continental U.S., are United States citizens. And they have been treated as second-class citizens for essentially the entire time, more than 100 years, that they have been United States citizens. It was Democrats that made sure that when we passed the Affordable Care Act, that it applied in Puerto Rico, that we extended access to health insurance to Puerto Ricans on the island and here. And it continues to be Republicans who want to leave them as some kind of asterisk next to their citizenship. We want to make sure that they have the ability to thrive and live anywhere in the United States and make sure that they are treated equally. Thank you.
With that, thank you all very much.